Reading a BOQ is easy, and today you're going to find out how and why. Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond the Measure. I'm a Quantities graduate, passionate to share what I've learned so you can navigate the field easily. In this video, we're going to find out how to read a BOQ and why it's pretty important. So this video is going to be put into 3 different sections. I'll put the time lapse below. The first section is the introduction, so what is a BOQ, and the second one is how we're going to be reading a BOQ, and the third one is why it's important and what will happen if we don't have a BOQ. So a BOQ describes the quality and the quantity of the work to be done in the construction projects. BOQ stands for Bill of Quantities. So it's a bill document which explains each item by section and different bills to find out the total amount that we'll be using for that project itself. There are content in the BOQ that explains the quality of the items or the work to be done, and there's a column in the BOQ that explains the quantity of each item that we need for the project. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen right now. On the screen I have a sample BOQ that I found online. So it's kind of very basic, very like a simple structure that you'd find for a BOQ. So each company, they'll customize it a little bit, maybe add a front page, which is pretty important. So the sample does not have one. There is a summary sheet, and then there's different tabs here in the Excel sheet that you can find each section by. So we'll go on to the first summary sheet. The summary sheet of a BOQ kind of explains each bill by itself. So in Sri Lanka, we might explain this as Bill 1, site construction, Bill 2, concrete works, Bill 3, masonry. So as we go through, it will be bill. So we'll have about, I think maximum 19 bills, maybe more than that. Basically, we kind of have the bills for the excavation, the concrete works, masonry, metal works, any kind of doors and windows, any kind of thermal insulation protections, finishes, and any kind of special coverages and external works. If you go on here, you can see this sample kind of has information on only the total residential building amount. So that's kind of the amount of the for the project. You'll be using 6 million. I think this is dollars. So unlike my sample here, this is a sample BOQ of from a project that I worked on, and I'm not going to show you the amounts because that's confidential. But under the bills, as you can see here, I mentioned the bill numbers. So that's bill number 16 and 17 at the end. Then we have the subtotals. Then we actually include the contingencies as well, which is 10%, or it depends on the contract itself, but it's a percentage of the total project. And we add the contingencies to find the total amount after the contingencies. And then if we have any professional sums or any day works, we're going to be including that, and that will bring its total amount for the project. But when we're mentioning about the contract price or the project price, we will only be mentioning the subtotal 1 before the contingencies. Then we can go on to the different types of notes that we have here. I'm going to be using this sample so you guys can see exactly what I'm going through. As you can see here, there's separate tabs used for the separate bills, and they will be linked to the page. As you can see here, this is linked to site, which is here, and F27. So if we go here to this tab, and if we see F27, that will be this one right here. This is what's linked in the summary sheet. Here you can see the structure of a BOQ. Usually at the top we have some information like the project name, the contractor, the consultant, the client, when the project is due and when it was started, the total ICP, which is the initial contract price, and then we go on to the table of the BOQ. So a BOQ's standard format are these 5 columns or 4 columns. So they are item, the description, quantity, unit, rate, and amount. So you have these 6 columns. They are going to be following through to each section, as you can see here, but we'll get this for an example. So the description kind of explains what the item is. This is where you get the quality and the detail of the item works. Here, this section with an underlined part, this is usually where they have a common information, additional information that you need for the item. Then you go on to more specific sections. Here you can see they're explaining what kind of excavation that needs to be made with a depth less than 1.25 meters. So it depends on your work. We have a program, we have a planning. So according to that plan, we write the excavation details, and then depending on what kind of foundation or whatever the excavation that needs to be done, these will be separated because they have to be measured separately. Here you can see the next part is the quantity section. This is where once you take off the quantities, you're going to be inputting them into the quantity section, and then you have the unit section, the unit of measurement. You get that from the SLS as well if you're doing this in Sri Lanka in standard Sri Lankan method. Then we go on to the rate. The rate is per unit. So for 1 unit of, for example, mat foundation, it's going to be 24.5 SR as per this, but we'll be doing in Sri Lankan rupees, so that's LKR. So the rate, it's taken out from basic rates and common rates that you can find, or you can calculate the rates per unit. That's a different section that I have to cover. So once you get the rate, you multiply that by the quantity and you get the amount. As you can see here, E14 times C14. If I double click on that, you can see the method and how it's being measured. C14 and E14 multiplied together. And now the item section. The item section is kind of a labeling. Instead of numbers, we usually go for alphabets, and they might go as a 1, 2, 3 as well if it's within the section. It kind of depends on the format that the consultant is doing. So it kind of is the same thing for all the other build as well. You can see this is concrete work, which means it will only cover the sections under concrete, which is F and G, I think. F section in SLS 573, and you will be covering all of that here, and the total will be put into the final, and that's what's linked in the summary sheet here. So that's the basic thing that you need to know to read a BOQ. You should be able to read a BOQ by, for example, if you want to read this item, you have to go for the comment section here. So that's precast concrete shaft caping per architectural drawing made with reinforced concrete, blah 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 blah, in accordance with specification and drawings. And then you have here the main part, which is 60mm thick of caping. So that's 6, and you have the main part here, which is 60mm thick of capping of dimension, and you mentioned the dimension as well, which explains what it's been measured with, and it's divided into panels per architectural details. So with the architectural details, we can find out it's measured in, it's divided into panels, so that's how it's divided into panels. And you have the unit of measurement here, so they measured in numbers. There's 4 of the capping, and 1 capping is about 244.8 as according to this sample BOQ, and the total will be multiplied by these 2 together. So now you found out how to read a BOQ, and I hope you understood how to do it and you know why we use it. So what is important? Why is it important? Because having a BOQ means that you have an idea of what are the qualities that are found in the project and what about the quantities that are being measured and the total amount. So that's kind of the basic mind map that we have as we go through the project, and how we navigate on if we're doing the quantities correctly and the items are done quickly. So we kind of can keep an eye on using the BOQ. And it's important that we measure the rate up to the quantities. If not, we won't know how much we're spending, which is a pretty negative point when you're coming to construction. And other than that, make sure you do it correctly, because some of the limitations and some of the disadvantages that we have with BOQ, if it's manually scripted especially, is we can make a lot of human errors. If you don't measure properly, if you don't calculate properly, it's going to be a huge mess and it's not worth the while. So we usually use softwares to do the calculations, which is, in this case, we usually use Excel formats. So we can just link these together and it will be accurately taken over to the next page. And to be more accurate of what you're measuring, it's really important that you use softwares. I think a lot of companies now, especially in Sri Lanka, they are adapting to software works. They use softwares to take off quantities instead of looking at a manual drawing and a manual TDS and get the work done, which also takes a lot of time, so it's not very efficient. Using a software, we can actually just place the drawing inside and then click on all the needed things that we need to take off quantities, and the quantities will be more accurate than a human working out. So using those quantities, we bring it down to an Excel sheet and we copy and link it to the quantities in the bill of quantities, so BOQ. And this is more accurate than manually doing so. That's why doing a correct method of BOQ is really important. And when you're reading a BOQ, make sure you're not reading as assumptions. Read the descriptions properly or write the descriptions properly so they have a proper understanding of what's going to be happening in that specific work item. So basically a BOQ would have a structure of bills as the SMS 573 or whatever standards that you're using. So it goes from preliminaries to excavation to concrete works to masonry and to doors and windows, metal works, and so on, plumbing and etc. So the format is kind of smooth flowing as you would go from an actual construction site. So you start with mobilization, site preparation, and then you go on to the excavation, and you go on to the foundation works, the concrete works, and you go for the masonry, you build the walls up, and then you go on to doing the doors, the windows, the finishes, the plastering sections. So it has a really beautiful flow in it, and that's how a BOQ should be, which makes it so much more easier to read. So find or prepare a BOQ as to that, and I hope you understand how to read a BOQ. If you didn't understand any of the terms that I use, I have a term section that I've done and continuing to do in part sections, so make sure to check that out. I'll leave a link down below, and I hope you find this video informative. And if you did, share it with your friends so they can understand how to read a BOQ as well. And make sure you subscribe, it supports me a lot. And click that like button. I post a new video once a week, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.